Hey everyone, welcome back to JP's Budget Collecting and our weekly look back at the hot comics from 6 months ago. This week we're looking back at the hot comics from May 3rd, 2024. I'm recording this on November 2nd, 2024. As always, those dates are just so you know when this information is actually most relevant because the market is always moving and changing. Also, as always, we're looking back at the CBSI Hot Top 10 and the Comic Tom Key Collector Hottest Trending Comics of the Week. We use those two lists to see what was moving in the market, what were people chasing, and, just to see what was going on so we can learn, what books should we go after, what books should we not, what are the factors affecting the books that make it a good buy or something you should be patient on. So, that is what we do here every week. I give that same spiel every week, and I appreciate you guys hanging out with me. This week we got 17 books to talk about. One little notice before we go in. I did get my voting done today. I voted early, so that's coming up on Tuesday. Go vote. I won't give you any other political spiel other than that. So with that, let's dig into this list. First up, we got Sandman, number 25. The first appearance of the Dead Boy Detectives. Basically, the show came out that week. That was why this book was on the list. Raw copies were going for $25 to $50. No 9.8 sales listed back then. Now raw copies are $10 to $25. 9.8, only one sale, went for $250, but definitely down in a trap on those raw copies. I think the show got pretty decent reviews. Not as good as like the Sandman show itself, but I think the show got pretty decent reviews, but we've moved away from it and the interest has waned. Next, we have Avengelyne, number 1 from 1995. This was hitting the list. I think this is the second week in a row. I think it hits the list multiple times back in the spring because Margot Robbie's production company picked this up. Olivia Wilde is supposedly directing. Or Olivia Wilde. I don't remember if it's Wilde or Wilde. Anyway, supposedly she's going to direct it. She's got a decent directing history. $20 to $30 back then. 9.8 for $200. Now it's a $2 to $15 book. 9.8, $50 to $75. That's a dumpster fire. Yeah, there were some rumors going on about this. I think it has been picked up. I think they're working on it, but we're a long way out from it actually happening. And because of that, the book has returned to what the book has always been. And so we will see. If you believe that this is going to happen, now is a much better time to pick up the book than back in the spring. All right, next we have DC Comics Presents number 47. First appearance of He-Man in comics. And this is live action rumors again. Back then, had live action rumors multiple times over the last few years. So far, nothing has ever come of it. But back in the spring, we were on this train one more time. Raw copies 100 to 140. 9.8 hitting 1850. 9.6s were 350 to 500. Now it's a $40 to $150 book raw. 9.8 $1,050. That is a trap. The book is, again, kind of returning much more closely to what its long-term value has been. We get bumps on this book every so often because we get rumors, but so far nothing's ever happened with a live-action He-Man in at least the last decade. So, next we're going to start moving into our covers, and our first one is that we got another Dave Stevens cover hitting the list. Man, people were all about Dave Stevens back in the spring. This is Crossfire number 12, the one with the blonde that kind of looks like Marilyn Monroe. This Dave Stevens book, reminder, there was a Dave Stevens documentary, which is what kind of prompted all this Dave Stevens love. Raw copies were 115. A 9.0 of this book went for 300. So people were jumping all over all the copies they could find in this book. Now, raw copies are running at $30 to $100, depending on condition. 9.8, $250 to $315. So it was a $300 book in a 9.0. Now it's a $250 to $300 book in a 9.8. 9.6s you can get for around $100. So yeah, this is a dumpster fire for anybody that paid that $300 for a 9.0. Yeah, was not a good investment. Still really cool covers. Dave Stevens got great art, a great artist to kind of follow. But yeah, the books have definitely returned back to more reasonable prices. Next, we have Deadpool Wolverine World War III, number 1, the One Per Store Del Auto. Again, this was all about hype. A little bit of hype just for Deadpool Wolverine was coming, and this was kind of a cool cover, so people were all about it. $30 to $55 for a raw copy back then. I will say the only difference between this and a trade dress was the costume change or at least from the open order trade dress. So So 30 to 55 for raw copy back then. Now it's a $5 to $20 book. 9.8, 35 to 70. So you get 9.8 for what you're paying for raws back then. So yeah, that's a dumpster fire. Decent Deadpool and Wolverine cover, but not necessarily one that really stands out in a market where there's a lot of these kinds of covers. So next we can move into Blood Hunt, Red Band Edition #1. The Linnell Francis Yu 1 in 25. This was the first of these Blood Hunt 1 in 25s. It was an homage back to some pre-code horror covers. This is, of course, Suspense Stories #22 homage, which has been homaged a bunch. So this was why this was hitting the list. People were going crazy for this. Right out of the gate, it was a $50 to $80 book. Now it's a $50 to $130 book. 9.8, 130 to 200. So we're still up worth it compared to that first week. We got this book going to be on the list more weeks than this. We will be interesting to see how high it got back then and what it's doing compared to where it's at now. But definitely, if you got in on that very first week, you're still doing okay if you chase this particular cover. And these are fun covers and definitely a fun pre-code horror cover for sure, and then usually these homages do pretty well to this particular one. Next, we have Amazing Spider-Man #39, and you're going, wait, that says X-Men, and it's got Disney figures on it. This was another one of those Disney anniversary variants that homaged a Marvel cover, but instead of putting it on a book like X-Men, they put all of these on ASM books. So all of these are variants to ASM books, even though none of them say ASM, and they say the title that they're homaging for these Disney variants. I do not know why Marvel did this. It annoys the crap out of me. But anyway, raw copies on this one we're going for $6, 9.8, 63, and you're like, what? And this was just like a 400% increase in sales for this. I guess it was around the X-Men show. Not sure exactly why people were suddenly buying these up. Wasn't really going for big value. There was just lots of sales, so Tom put it on the list. Now it's a $5 to $15 book, so, on the upper end, you can say kind of worth it on the raw side. 40 to 55 for 9.8, so kind of an I'll be back on that side. So overall, we're just going to call it steady and I'll be back. These books are in the same range they were. Just definitely not the sales that was happening back then. Not sure what prompted all the sales in that particular moment. All right, next we had one kind of comic buzz book, and that is Spider-Woman #7. I believe she hits the list multiple times. This book hits the list multiple times. This is the first appearance of the Assembly, which was a new team, which is now apparently going to become the new champions. This is what they were talking about back then. So yeah, so this is what people. Anyway, people were specking on this because we were getting a new champions team, even though they were called the Assembly here. I don't know. Raw copies $10 to $25 back then. Now it's a cover price, the $12 book. So down in a trap on that is it's definitely half of what it was going for back then. I'm not sure. I think the this champions team hasn't actually come out yet. I think we know more about it, but nobody's really specking on it at the moment. All right, next, we're going to move into MCU stuff. We got Hulk #1, first appearance of the Red Hulk on the cover. A reminder, as always, this book hits the list a lot. He's not actually in this book. He's just on the cover, but this is the book everyone wants for Red Hulk because he's on the cover. That's the way that works. We like the covers. We don't necessarily care about what's inside sometimes. See pre-code horror. Anyway, 50 to 70 back then, 9.8, 230 to 300. Now it's a $40 to $110 book for a raw copy, 9.8, 250 to 400. So we're going to go kind of steady worth it. You can argue maybe up worth it. It's not really moved up a lot. It's kind of right in those same ranges with a couple of sales on the higher end. So we're going to say kind of worth it, or just above what was the higher end. We will see. We're going to be getting Red Hulk very soon. Harrison Ford is taking over as Thunderbolt Ross, both in Thunderbolts and in the new Captain America movie in 2025. So, yeah, be interesting to see how this takes once the character actually hits the screen. Next, we have Wolverine #154. This is just a Deadpool Wolverine story. This in 155 or, two Deadpool is a complete Deadpool Wolverine story. This was all about we'd gotten the trailer. People were hyped about the movie. That's really what's going on here. $15 back then. Raw copies were hit, or 9.8 was hitting 200. Now it's a $5 to $25 book for raw copies. They're pretty much that same kind of range. We're just going to call this steady and I'll be back. No reason to have chased it back then, but still hasn't really dropped a ton in price. All right, next we have Iron Fist number 14, first appearance of Sabretooth. We're a couple months past the movie, so I don't think there's any spoilers here, but spoilers if you haven't seen Deadpool and Wolverine yet. Sabretooth does make an appearance, a brief one, in the movie, and we kind of got that teased with some photos from the set and that kind of stuff, which is why this book was hitting the list back then. Raw copies, 150 to 350, 9.8, 38.40. Back then. Now it's a $100 to $500 book for raw copies. 9.8, 32 to 3,600. So we're gonna call this steady. I'll be back. A little cheaper on a few of the slab sales than they were 6 months ago. Now that we're a few months removed from the movie, raw copies kind of the same range, just expanded on both ends. So yeah, we'll just call this another steady, and I'll be back. If you bought in, you did okay. But if you're patient, you might have found a deal. So. All right, let's see. We still got more MCU books. We got Dazzler number 1 for solo appearance. Dazzler did not, unlike Sabretooth, Dazzler did not appear in the movie. So raw copies back then were 25, 9.8, 189. Much like her first appearance we talked about last week, it's an I'll be back so far. Not the huge drop I was necessarily suspecting. 5 to 25 for raw copies now. So still high end, still getting up there toward where the average was. 120 to 250 on a 9.8. Although that 250 is a little higher than most of the others. Most of the others are under the $200 mark. But down and I'll be back overall for this particular book. Yeah, I would expect Dazzler to continue to slowly take steps back. But she's already sustained better than I expected, seeing as this didn't actually happen. All right, with that, we're going to move. We got one more MCU book before we move into just pure X-Men 97 stuff. We got Fantastic Four, number 48, first appearance of Silver Surfer. Obviously, this was all the news coming out about the Fantastic Four movie that we were getting back in the spring was causing this classic huge key to hit the list. 700 to 2,500 for a raw copy. 3.0 going for around 1,000. There's a 9.8 sale that went for 63,000. No recent 9.8 sales to compare that to, but yeah, just looking kind of at those low grade like a 3.0. Now it's 750 to 850, and raw copies 250 to 1,500, which could just be the condition on the raw copy not getting up to that 25. But if you look across some of those lower grades, most of them have taken a very slight step back since the news in the spring. You can get a little better deal, so we'll call it down and I'll be back on this particular book. No, being patient would have paid off a little bit here. Although, honestly, if you bought in, eventually you're going to be okay in terms of turning this book around, because long term, this is obviously a straight cash book. So, all right, next we got what, 1, 2, 3, 4 X-Men 97 directly related books. We have Marvel graphic novel number 5, God Loves, Man Kills, and this is just kind of spec for, I guess they were put this on the list claiming it was spec for a future story plot line for the next season, not even for the season we were getting at the time. I'm not sure. Anyway, but people were or maybe people were just into X-Men stuff, is what I think was more likely. People were just anything X-Men they were enjoying because they were enjoying X-Men 97. So yeah, this is one, if not the best X-Men story of all time. $30 back then for a raw copy, 9.8 hitting 270. No recent 9.8 sales. Raw copies 10 to 80. I mean, a huge range on a raw copy on this one, depending on condition. So we'll just call it steady and worth it. Most of the sales are kind of in that $30, $40-ish range. Steady and worth it. If you bought in, you didn't lose any, because you're not, because this is just a great story. So, all right. Next, we have X-Men number 53, the first appearance of Onslaught, and then this is still people predicting for next season. We did get enough right at the end, like enough, teases to the storyline that set up Onslaught at the end of the season to kind of like make people think, oh, we're going to get Onslaught, $10 to $15 for a raw copy, 9.8 hitting 100. And now it's a $1 to $15 copy, 9.8, 1 to 150. Again, we'll just call it steady and I'll be back. I mean, maybe you could argue worth it because the 9.8s have crept up maybe a little bit. But overall, it's really right in the same area. So No reason to have chased Onslaught yet. We'll see what we get next time when we get the new season, which I'm not sure exactly what the timing on that's going to be. Maybe it's next year. Not quite sure. All right. Next, we have a book on the list for, again, this is X-Men, Uncanny X-Men number 333. First full appearance of Bastion, our big villain from season 1. $20 to $32 back then. 9.8, 130. Now it's a $2 to $15 book. 9.8, 1 to 150. So there's 9.8s are sitting in about the same range, but definitely the raw copies have plummeted. So overall, we're just going to call this down in a trap because of the raw copies and because that is the vast majority of the sales. Not a love for Bastion anymore, although the 9.8s have held better than I thought they would. And then last but not least, we have Uncanny X-Men 200, The Trial of Magneto, which was the storyline for one of our episodes. Raw copies 20, 9.8, 160. Now it's a 5 to 20, 9.8, 90 to 125. So down and I'll be back. No reason to have chased this book back then. Great story. Another great story. Get it to read it, but don't get it for spec. So, all right. That was this week's list. I want to thank you guys for watching. One last reminder to go do this when you get the chance, and we will catch you next time. Later.